Here we are going to learn 3 important rules of logarithms. You need to know these rules, and you also need to know them by name. First of which we have the product rule. The product rule says if you're taking the single log of a product of 2 values, that product being the argument of the log, then the log can be broken apart as 2 separate logs, and those 2 logs are added. So log of m times n equals log of m plus log of n. Notice here that the bases remain the same, so whatever base that you have to start with, you keep that base when you split the 2 logs apart. Second rule is the power rule. The power rule says if there's a power on the argument of the log, then you can rewrite it as the power multiplied in front of the log. So the power here ends up going to the front and is multiplied by the log. The last one is the quotient rule. And I'm going to say the quotient rule is specifically for n not equal to 0. We see that we're taking the log of a quotient, m over n. We know the bottom value could not be 0. If you're taking the single log of a quotient and your argument is the thing that's the quotient, then you can break this apart as 2 logs being subtracted. Notice that you always take the log of the top number first and then minus the log of the second number, the bottom number last. Okay, let's use some of these rules. First, express as sum of logarithms. So the instructions specifically say they want you to take these and break them apart as the sum of logarithms. Part A matches our product rule. We have a single log and then our argument is a product. The product rule says that you break this apart as 2 separate logs, and you basically do log of the first number in the product, and then you do plus log of the second number in the product. Notice that this log is understood to be base 10, and then the logs in our answer are also base 10. Now if you ever notice that you can simplify something in a log, you want to go ahead and do so. On these, you wouldn't be able to simplify except by using your calculator, so we can just leave it log base 10 of 8 and log base 10 of 6 and be okay. The second problem, we have log of 0.2x. This, I'm going to say, is a hidden product. In other words, we can rewrite this originally as log of 0.2 times x. So it's an understood product since your 0.2 and your x are touching. Then we can use the product rule and say if you have log of a product, it becomes 2 logs, and then you add the 2 logs together. Okay, so log of a product becomes the sum of 2 logs, and then this would be your final answer. Okay, neither one of those 2 logs simplify as well. This last log, let me bring it down where we have a little bit more room. I'm actually going to rewrite it. So we have log base 3 of 3xy. I'm actually going to think of this as the product of 3 things. So it's actually log base 3 of 3 times x times y. And it turns out we can use the product rule multiple times. So in other words, the original product rule says if you have the product of 2 things, then you can break it apart as the sum of 2 logs. This one you have the product of 3 things, and so it would be broken apart as the sum of 3 logs. Notice here that the base on our log is 3, so you want to make sure to keep that base. So you say log base 3 of 3 plus log base 3 of x plus log base 3 of y. Now in this particular problem, there is a piece of this log that I can simplify. Earlier, we had a rule that said if your base matches the base of your argument, then the answer is your understood exponent, which in this case would be 1. And so this log base 3 of 3 would reduce to a 1. Neither of the other 2 logs are reducible, and so we will leave them like they are. Sometimes you'll have a question of, are you done or are you not done? Generally speaking, you want to make sure that your arguments are just single values. So in this case, my argument on the second log is just an x, argument in the last log is just a y. And then also make sure we can't use some kind of special rule like we did here to simplify one of them. Okay, if the answer to those things are no, then you're done simplifying your question. One other thing I want to point out is that these 3 rules that we have up here at the top, these 3 rules must be memorized. And not only do you need to know them forward, but you also need to know them backward. In other words, for the product rule that we have used specifically below, know that the log of a product splits apart as the sum of 2 logs. You also need to know that the sum of 2 logs go back together as a single log and the product of the 2 arguments. Okay, now, for this example, we have used mainly the product rule. We will use the power rule and the quotient rules in coming examples.